Welcome, everybody, to the Key to Games podcast here on Game Wisdom, where some of the art and science of games. I am Josh Beiser, and we have another great cast lined up this week. My co-host, indie game developer working on the upcoming game Samurai Pig, Joshua Reyes. How are you doing?
Doing great. It's been a busy week.
Mm-hmm.
Samurai Pig was in Unreal Engine 4, and now officially we have a stable working build in Unreal Engine 5. So we got that to see how it works out for us. So kind of excited about that. And you, Josh, what do you have going on?
Well, quite a bit. I'm talking with someone about doing some work with video game clubs at libraries, which could
Yeah.
be potentially huge. It's still very early, like we're just preliminary stuff right now, but if it goes through, it could be a very big deal for me, especially here on the East Coast. And of course, my next book is due out officially in 4 days, so I am excited
Right.
about that.
Countdown for that. And then you're at what, like 9K? You're over 9,000 now.
Yep, 9,000, I think 20 or 28 last I checked.
Yeah.
So we are officially in the final or less than 1,000 away from the big 10K.
10K, man. Big time.
Yeah, I need to make a video and an announcement about things too. By the time I make the announcement, maybe we'll hit like 9,200. We'll
There you go. There you go.
But hello everybody in chat. Thank you for the well wishes. And yeah, we do have a lot to talk about. So the topic this week has to do with the quite variety of remakes and remasters that seem to be going on in the game industry. So as of right now, we have The Last of Us that's getting a remake. No, it's getting a remaster. We have, of course, the Resident Evil 4 remake coming. I'm going to be confusing remake and remaster, I think, throughout this
Right.
entire cast. There's talk of a Tomb Raider reboot, or should I say a second Tomb Raider reboot.
I did not hear that. I didn't hear that news.
Yeah, there are rumors that it's going to involve her mentoring people and having like more people along, and of course the fans are arguing that's not what Tomb Raider is. I'm sure we'll be getting to fandom at some point in this discussion. What else? Any other reboots or remasters coming along? Of
Gotta be
course,
some more,
yeah.
right?
I mean, we had the Demon Souls
Demon Soul.
remaster. That was
Yeah.
no, that was like 2 years ago. Again, it feels like the last 2-3 years are just like flying by.
Yeah, I think Mira and I actually you played some of the Demon Souls remake. I hadn't get to touch it. I'm dying to. It's just access to a PS5 is it's a little
Mm-hmm.
difficult right now.
Oh, thank you, Joe. There was a Diablo 2
Diablo 2,
remaster, Warcraft 3,
Warcraft 3.
Age of Empires has gone their definitive edition, or several ones over the last few years. And my voice is dying already, but the list certainly keeps going on. And it is a very interesting point about, do games have a shelf life? Is there a point where we just can say it's not worth to play this game anymore? We need a new version. And one of my friends on Twitter, he just recently started playing the original Thief with mods and
Wow.
patches to that to make that playable, and he's enjoying the hell out of that.
Wow, I'm kind of surprised that like it holds up. I guess with all the mods and everything for quality
Mhm.
of life, it still holds up. But because that's an old game, man.
Yeah, that's like right at the beginning or right at the start of the immersive sim genre.
Right,
All
definitely.
the ImSim fans around here.
In Sims, we got a ton up in here, Josh.
Hmm. And it is a very interesting point about how well do games hold up. At what point do we just say we can let this game, rest in peace? Because there are a lot of games out there, and this is something that I talked about when it comes to Mon Retro. I still need to make that post about the mistakes of Mon Retro design. That there are a lot of, well, just bad retro games. There's a lot of them that just do not hold. They didn't really arguably hold up back when they were first released.
Yeah, they weren't even that good to start with. It was just like nostalgia, and you're like, yeah, that was cool, but there wasn't a lot of games to play, right? So it's like doing some of those games, they probably didn't need a remaster or a remake or a revision.
Mm-hmm.
There was really nothing there originally.
No, there was not. If anyone remembers the LJN games, all the weird movie license games for the SNES, and so on.
Yeah, yeah, a ton of those. Those that Noid, Yo Noid.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone, any Yo Noid fans in here?
Like, that was
In
a
the NES?
that was a weird one as well.
Very, very, very weird. There were some very strange NES adaptations. See,
Mm-hmm.
there's someone might, maybe someone will do a Yo Noid remake in chat.
Maybe. And part of the issue, I think, with some of these games, of course, is that this also gets at the point about game preservation. That there are a
Yeah,
lot of titles that just we can't play anymore. They literally either there's no modern version of them, the consoles back then don't are lost in time, and even in that case, like we look at stuff like the Wii, Wii U, and the Switch back catalogs. Those are tied to those games, or tied to those respective platforms. So when they go away, so do the games.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah. So so a part of that, like that's a part of the like remakes and revision. We're hoping to keep them alive, right? Like one of my favorite points about it is that if you're remaking something, we're going from the PS3 and it's going to go to like the PS4, or we're going to remake it and put it on the PC, right? Hopefully, go to the PC where things when they go to the PC, they have the longest chances of living, right? Somehow, some
Mm-hmm.
way. If it's trapped off in proprietary software, that's where it gets into proprietary hardware. That's where issues pop up, right? Because like you
Mm-hmm.
said, you cannot find. Good luck finding the disc, right, for this old rare RPG or whatever. Otherwise, you're going to have to get emulators and stuff like that. So, of course, for preservation, it is required and needed, right? In
Mm-hmm.
that respect, definitely, Josh.
Yeah. And there's one that we forgot. There's a Dead Space remake coming as
Oh
well.
yes, I'm finally gonna play. I'm gonna play it this time. You gonna play it, Josh?
Oh yeah.
Too many indie games, brother. You know what
Yep. All those indie games like Call of Duty and Resident Evil we're gonna have to play.
I mean?
But I think a very important point we should clarify, of course, is what is the difference between a remake and a remaster, considering how many times we're going to probably mess it up over the next
Yeah,
hour or so.
right. So
So, a remake is when a game is rebuilt. So, it is rebuilt from scratch and usually done to modernize a title. So, we could, of course, say the Resident Evil 2, 3, and well, now 4 is going to be an example of a remake. When we look at stuff like Dead Space, I think is also going to be a remake as well. A remaster is when a excuse me, remaster is when a game is simply taken from one platform to another, could feature either small or huge graphical updates. So this would be, of course, when they did that horrible Grand Theft Auto remaster that everyone hated. That it was like done super cheap. The when Alan Wake I think was brought, there was an Wake remaster. There was a Ghostbusters the video game remaster. I think this was like a few years ago. So these are the ones that are done when you're simply just trying to give a game some additional life. It's not supposed to be a lot of work, or it's not supposed to be a brand new game. You're just trying to make it so that if this was a PlayStation 2 game, now we can play on the PlayStation 5.
yeah, and we're gonna go ahead and because we're changing platforms on the new platforms, you weren't able to play it before. We're gonna upres some of the textures. It's gonna look nice.
Mm-hmm.
And probably they don't really affect too much of like the core game at all, right? Like if any. And so like maybe some do like minor quality of life changes and stuff like that. But yeah, basically that is the scope of that.
Mm-hmm. And
And
there's usually like these are kind of kept depending upon the developer, they're usually kept to be priced relatively competitive. Although we've seen
right.
some that are like, here's $60 for a Final Fantasy remake. Or what was the one that just came out? Or the
Yeah.
Diablo 2, wasn't that like $40 or $50? The Warcraft 3 one as well.
So like the Diablo one, how much would that should have been priced, you think? The Diablo 2 one?
I don't know. I would say maybe like $20 to $30,
20 and
somewhere
then
around there.
45 for the Final Fantasy 7 remake instead of like $60, right? You know what I mean? Like
Mm,
did I misspoke? Remake, remaster. Anyway, we know what they are.
yeah, I'm pretty sure that was we will consider that a remake. And so they just
Remake, yeah.
completely rebuilt from the ground up. And there's definitely like part of this discussion I think is very interesting is when you do remake something, how far do you go with it? Because this was again like with Final Fantasy VII, it's pretty much a brand new game. Like it's not
Yeah, not
anywhere
even.
like the original.
No, and I love, yeah, people. I had a friend ask me earlier today because they're a Final Fantasy fan and they didn't like seven. I was like, well, the old one. And I was like, well, you'll probably like the new one because it's not even
Mm-hmm.
anything. It's a re envisioning, reimagining type of thing. You know what I mean? So completely
Mm-hmm.
different, using battle systems that are different and stuff like that. And I think that's really cool. So if we're going with a remake, right?
Mm-hmm.
A remake is when we're just
Completely
completely
rebuilding it.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're going with the remake, I think that you should go free reign, right? Like I think I am for like going as far as you can with possible with technology, keeping within the lore. Like if you're going to like try and stick true to the roots, make a remaster instead, right? If you're doing a remake, I think you should really try and push the boundaries and explore what you can. You know what you couldn't do 10 years ago with technology, what you couldn't do animation fidelity wise, AI wise, stuff like that. Push those boundaries, push those particles.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what you should definitely do when you're remaking it. Go for it. Like turn it up to 11.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that is a very interesting point, especially when we look at probably one of the high marks of a remake, or actually two of them, Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 2. Incidentally, both remakes being like 20 years apart, which is kind of
Yeah,
funny. But the Resident Evil 1 remake, that I consider that to be one of the best horror games, probably one of the best Resident Evil games of all time,
of all time.
they completely gutted the PlayStation 1 Resident Evil and rebuilt it entirely. It is a completely different game. If we talk about Resident Evil 1 PlayStation 1, Resident Evil 1 GameCube, brand new things were added, the entire mansion was completely restructured. And then the same thing goes for Resident Evil 2 Remake. And Resident Evil 2 Remake was one of those games that a lot of people really did not expect it to do well.
Yeah,
And
I thought it was gonna bomb. I thought no one was gonna like it, and it blew. I was blown away. I love it. I got here right here. See, love it. It's a great game. See, I
yep.
still have it. So
And part of the reason, of course, is that they basically built the game using, well, I guess like what was that 2018, 2018 I think it was, or 2018, 2019 technology to make that game.
yep.
They weren't held back by the standards of the PlayStation 1, and it worked really well. But then conversely, we have the Resident Evil 3 remake that did not do as well, and a lot of people felt
Yeah.
that it didn't go far enough.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I didn't have enough experience with that one I just all the negative press, and I'm not sure what exactly went wrong. If it was a different team, or something, because two was done so well, I was expecting three to be done like clockwork, like that, right? Like they were going to take it exactly how they did, and somehow three is definitely has a ton of stuff you can do with it that would it's a really amazing game on its own anyway.
Mm-hmm. And trying to, I guess, get that magic for the different remakes and the remasters is a very tough point because how far do you take some before it's not really the same game or it's not really, honoring that original game? And then there are some people who argue, well, if it's just, the same game, but let's say instead of using PlayStation 2 graphics, it's, Unreal 4, why should I spend that much money on it?
Right. And then so then you have there has to be a reason for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're either preserving it, right? We're taking it and preserving it as a remake or the other one will just have to be a remaster, right? That's the only way to justify it
Mm-hmm.
is like moving it to a platform that is no longer dead, that is viable platform to use, so the game can still be played, a little bit of updates here and there. Um, Otherwise, to make the purchase viable, you'd have to do a remaster and have to change a lot of stuff about it, just like how we are talking about Final Fantasy VII, completely different. Offer a reason for someone to play the game, right?
Mm-hmm. And you are never going to, I think, capture the original's magic. Like, it's just.
No.
And this, again, goes back to, like, the major point about do video games expire. Like, there are a lot of games that are products of their time.
Yeah.
That if
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
just try to take that game and go one to one with it today, it's not going to work.
Not at all. Not at all.
Technology and UI have advanced. What people expect out of games have changed. Like some of my favorite games, like the original XCOM, Star Control 2, they were groundbreaking back in 1990, 1991. They do not hold up today. Like
No.
they were original for that time, but again, it's that issue of rose tinted glasses that they just do not work. And there have been a lot of developers who have tried to chase those games. And this is something that we talked about when we did our talk on Mon Retro. That a lot of developers look at these classics as these unmovable stones
Right.
that.
As these stones that you must honor perfectly, and they
Mhm.
can never be changed. They're immutable.
Yeah.
But that's Go ahead, Josh.
Oh no, finish your thought.
But yeah, I mean, and it doesn't work like that. It's like I wanted to, I don't know, somehow into a podcast about like talking about old game is old, right? I'm not sure how to phrase that, but they just expire. The mechanics, the things like that, there are better ways to execute lots, like in XCOM, for example. There
Mhm.
was probably many things in there that now in current games of that generation handle it a million times better and work that better. And so you go back and you're looking at it doesn't work anymore, right? So you
Mhm.
couldn't just port that game over. It would be terrible. I think Warcraft, they did that, right? They ported over one of them.
I
I'm
know they've
trying to.
done a few like
There was like
ports and
one really bad one, and they ported it
Warcraft
over.
3 or not
Anyway,
sure.
regardless, it's just like, yeah, you cannot. The source material is the source material, and even then, if you're doing a remaster, you need to be sure that you're updating like at least the minimal three. It was three, yeah, three was that bad
Okay.
port. It's at least, like, you need to find the original pain points that were there, right? Like you could go back to XCOM and pick out a million things that need to change for it
Mhm.
to be viable in today's market, and those things will need to be changed to work, right? Because some games you cannot remake. I'm sorry, you cannot remaster because they need a remake instead, or a revisioning, right? So
Mhm. Yeah. And again, like there's nothing like when we talk about this, we're not saying that Star Control is a horrible game or Mario was bad or anything like that. They are, again, they're products of their time. And when we do our talk, we're still trying to get people for our influential game series. I think we may be getting close to getting one episode scheduled. When we talk about that, we can look and trace how these genres have evolved. But the main word there, of course, is evolve. They have to grow. A genre that just is one game or one gameplay loop and that's it doesn't really last long. Whether it is a horror game, a Metroidvania, first, third person shooter, whatever. So there has to be an evolution of it.
do
And
you do you think Fortnite would have evolved if Fortnite would be successful if they didn't evolve? They're constantly evolving, right?
mhm,
So it's like any game has to evolve to stay relevant, right?
yeah. And again, the audience changes. This is something that we've talked a lot about with some of the more nichier genres. That games like, old school RPGs, traditional roguelikes, adventure games, they have very enrooted fan bases. But at the same token, they're also very hard to get into if you didn't grow up playing them. Again, like if you've played any adventure game, I'm sure you're all automatically a fan of Watchet Eye and of all those indie developers that we've spoken to on the Adventure Game Roundtable. If you didn't grow up playing those games and you try to do it for the first time, it's like, what the hell is this? Why am I? What's this? Why am I like clicking on things? Why can't I just walk over to the spot?
Right. Like, why is the game broken? Did they need to let you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? It's so obtuse. It
Mm-hmm.
makes no sense, right? So So when I think we are going to be talking about adventure games. We're going to have a roundtable
Yeah.
about that soon, and you know how they need to evolve because it was such a pivotal. And I
Yeah.
know there needs to be a resurgence of it, but I think that some of the tenets, that stone table immutable things of adventure games need to change and need to be updated for it to carry over to like the current markets and to be viable, right?
I'm just wondering which fan base will we upset the most when we do our series? Who's going to be the one that's going to come after us? Will it be the roguelike fans, the adventure game fans? Maybe we'll get a
Yeah.
surprise and it'll be the horror fans. There's our shock there. The law came to love is going buried. And to Melwinius's comment, tough one, yeah, like, it is a very hard point about when do we say that a game is just no longer, I guess, it? And, like, going back to XCOM, again, like, if you look at XCOM and Firaxis's XCOM, that Jake Solomon in interviews and design talks, he said that the original version for XCOM, or Enemy Unknown, was to be very much a one-to-one of XCOM, the original. It was going to be very turn-based, time units. It was going to be, very much just like if someone made the original XCOM, but in 2012, or using 2012 engines and technology. And people weren't liking it. The market changed. Like, it just felt like a slower game. So they completely rebuilt it. They made it more of a tabletop kind of design. And they made no bones about the fact that they're not trying to beat the original XCOM. They're trying to make their own interpretation of XCOM. And I think that's a very subtle but important point, that
Right.
there are a lot of developers who, when they work on remakes or remasters, they tend to say, the original's bad, or, we're, completely destroying it. This is the true version of it. And I think that upsets a lot of fans. I think that's one of the things
Yeah.
about the Tomb Raider reboot that I didn't like, and I think a lot of fans didn't like. That it just felt like, everything you liked about the original Tomb Raider, nah, you were wrong about that. You want this version of Lara Croft. And
Yeah, I got to see that. I'm kind of surprised because I really like the reboots a lot, so I got to see what they took out of there. I liked it.
mhm. And hello, Vincent. Thanks for joining. What I call a
Hey, what's up,
franchise.
Vince?
If you're remaking everything every 2-3 years, what's
Yeah, yeah,
and
exactly. Good
there
point.
are cases where,
Reboot.
yeah, that you can take a game and modernize it. Mortal Kombat is probably a very big example of it. Mortal Kombat for a long time was dead. Like, it was just not popular. People weren't playing it. And
No,
then, what was it? Mortal MK. I was confused. I think it was MK8 was the
eight.
one that
Yeah, eight.
really brought things around. And when we talk about fighting games, I am very sure we're going to be mentioning the influence of Mortal Kombat 8 on the fighting
Yes,
game genre.
yes.
Let's see. Yep, and Terror from the Deep. I've heard a lot of people hated that game even back then for XCOM. And yeah, that's again one of the beauties about remakes and remasters. It can give a game a second chance, especially like Josh said earlier, if you can figure out those pain points and you can make things improved. Oh no, we're talking about when MK8 was first released, Pony. I still have to play Tekken 8. We may do that for next week. I'm sure you guys will beat me up in that one. But Night Dive, the studio that's been doing a lot of remasters, I think is a really good example of that. They did the Shadow Man, and Shadow Man the original was a very good game, but it was not the best game. Like, it had a lot of pain points, and even the PC version of that game was nigh unplayable because it just didn't work on modern platforms. And when they re-released it, or they did a remaster, it now works with a keyboard and mouse. It works with a gamepad. They've added in content that was cut for time that's now in it. And I think this is, again, like the high mark of a remake No, wait, I'm sorry, a remaster. There you go. A remaster is when it feels like the definitive edition. Like, this is the version of
Yeah,
the game that was originally meant. There's no more technical issues. It doesn't feel like developers were constrained. This is the version you want to play.
exactly. That's a really good point. Yeah, like a definitive edition is true to
Mm-hmm.
what they should be looking for. Why are you trying to play Rayman 2, Pony?
Does the original Rayman work? I think I tried that on GOG and it got a little weird.
Yeah, the
Okay.
original is really janky when I played it.
Go Rayman.
Rayman.
And yeah, but like again, where do you want to change things? Is that question? Because again, with a lot of remasters, on the small scale, it would be something like we're just updating the graphics and we're done. On the higher scale, it's we're fixing issues, we're adding new content, we're making this game better, but it's still being built off of the bones of the original. What was it? Darksiders. I always get Darksiders and Darkstalkers confused. One's the fighting game, one's the action adventure Souls
God of
like.
War, Souls, like, yeah,
Yeah, third person
Zelda.
shooter maybe. There was a Diablo like at one point franchise, and with Darksiders, when they did the remasters, they improved the graphics. They did add in new content, I believe. Darksiders, thank you, and it worked really well. And to Thomas's question, we're talking about, do games feel outdated? Is there a point when a game is just like there's just no reason to go back to it? Like the time has moved on. What was it? Command and Conquer, I think, is another big example. If you remember, Command and Conquer back in the 90s was the quintessential RTS. It was basically you play Command and Conquer or you play StarCraft. That was it. Like, those were
That
the
was
two
it.
biggies. And they did the Command and Conquer collection, which I have bought, and I think I played a sum total of 40
5 minutes.
minutes. Wait,
Whoa!
let's see. I played 108 minutes of it. Wow, that's more than I expected. And it was a very good game back then, but
Yeah,
it is hard to go back
yeah,
to it.
yeah. They literally changed like nothing. Right? It's the original. It's just like the original.
They
Yeah.
upscaled the graphics a little
Okay.
bit,
Yeah.
but pain points and everything are in
Everything is
this
in
one.
there. Yeah, and they're like, "That's the way it's supposed to be, baby."
hmm If you look as another really good example, Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition, if Thorn was or is watching, he would be shouting the praises from that. They upgraded the graphics, they updated the AI, and they've been adding in both the original expansions and fan-made expansions to that game. Like, it is considered, again, the original Age of Empires 2 is one of the, again, top of the top real-time strategy games. And this version of it is very much popular. It's still being played to this day, and they have, let's see, looks like 3 different expansions. They had the enhanced graphics patch. I think more people are playing 2 more than they're playing 4 that was released last year.
Wow.
And it's also in the shames is that, of course, if those of you watch, we play Rise of Nations, the enhanced edition, a lot on our Saturday night multiplayer nights, and I love that game. But it was released or it was remastered at that point when a remaster was just let's just make the graphics a little bit better. Done. There's nothing more improved with it. And I'm still waiting for Rise of Legends. We need to get that one.
Rise of Legends.
Just because more people need to experience that. Because it's such
Yeah.
a, like, very. There is that period in, like, the, what was it, like, early to mid 2000s when everyone was getting, like, really experimental and weird with RTSs. And that was one of those
Yeah,
games.
like RTS of everything. It was
Mm-hmm.
awesome. RTS all the things. It was the roguelike of that era.
Mm-hmm. There's something. Yeah, and to Thomas's point, that again gets back to some of these to the expiration date, and even to the love of older games. Is that
Yeah.
for people like we said with the adventure genre, if you grew up and you played any adventure game, then you're still a fan of the indie adventure games. You probably
Yeah.
played Thimbleweed Park, and again, pick any Watchet Eye game, and you're probably going to buy the Monkey Island reboot. Oh, there's another reboot that's come. I completely forgot about that one. We talked about it 4 weeks ago, too. And yet, I do remember Impossible Creatures,
Multiple
Pony.
creatures.
Yeah. But the point when we have all these, when we go back to these games, is can you make a viable market on them today? And that is a tougher point because, again, there's only so many people who will play a traditional roguelike or play an adventure game. Or, as we talked about, who would play an RPG built off of the Apple II. And
Yeah.
yes, if you can build your game and you can market straight to those people, it's going to work. But part of the challenge, as we've said, is that design evolves. Whether it's with the inclusion of live service elements, more DLC, or even just modernizing UI UX. Here's another really good point we haven't discussed yet: accessibility features.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Like, yeah, how can you? There's literally no accessibility features in those games, and then you're going to take that game and throw it to the current now, and
Mm-hmm.
all these people can't play it. Colorblind people can't play it. No speech, or CC's closed captioning on it or anything. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's a lot of stuff. And then your game's already niche to begin with. That's really leaving a lot of people out.
Yep. And again, it's one of those major points that no one was thinking of 30 years ago. Like, there was
Exactly.
no talk about UI UX, maybe outside Nintendo. I think Nintendo was probably one of the first to really push into that with their games.
Yeah.
But even then, it does beg that question of, you try to have someone play these games today. And again, like, this is, I think, one of those big points that for our audience, we have a lot of older gamers, I'm sure. We have people who grew up playing games like Rayman, or let's see if I can mess with anyone who played a Snake Rattle and Roll.
Snake Rattle and Roll. I played it at the kiosk at Sears, Josh.
There, man, we're old. But we grew up on these games. We have that experience. But when you're trying to appeal to a growing market, you need to think about how far back are you willing to go, or how much do you want to change in those games. With some of the games from what was it, Soldak Entertainment, like, I really enjoy his ARPGs, but they are very rough in terms of that new player's experience. And even just, I know that he's remastered, I think, a few of his games. It's just simply upscaling the graphics. It's not changing, any of the core issues that people may have had. And there are some people, to Pony's comment about StarCraft. There's a lot of people who love StarCraft 1 and they
Yeah.
never went to StarCraft 2.
Yeah, they're still on StarCraft 1.
Oh, another remake, Gothic 1. Never played Gothic.
Nah, me neither. Never played Gothic. Any there's more than one?
And yeah, like, for a lot of these games, especially, like, if we talk, like, mid-90s, there was a lot of experimental games, or a lot of original games being released at that point, that would then go on to be the basis for a lot of games we would see today. Again, stuff like the original Doom, Duke Nukem, Mario, Super Mario 64 that we talked about. And I think we did have this talk, or it's on our list, about games that are timeless, or that could be the evolution of the influential games cast. That there are games that stand the test of time.
Right. Yeah, they're just definitely there. You can go back and you can play them. There's fun to play. You can learn so much because
Mm-hmm.
they are like gems of knowledge of high level game design, like all put together at some of the highest levels. And so you can extract a lot from these timeless games, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Definitely go back to Mario 64. You can learn a lot about level design, player controllers,
Mm-hmm.
um, boss layouts, like just it's endless,
And it is a bit of like a tricky point, of course, is that we talk about how you need to play a lot of games today, but you also need to play a lot, but you shouldn't play a lot of games that don't hold up. But you should also play them to learn them. We're kind of giving
Right.
it's like three different mixed messages all at the same time. And
But it's the truth.
yeah, like there are some people who will say like Super Mario 64 doesn't hold up, and I would question it still does hold up. Like again, like there are games that become the benchmarks for the genre. And thank you, Emerson, and thanks for stopping by. But there are games that when they become the benchmarks, you do have to study them. Much like how if you're trying to, build a car for the first time or, become an artist, you should study, very big examples of what, popular paintings. And yeah, speedrun games.
Yeah,
Speedrunning has
speed
been, I
running.
think, a huge, point about this. Like, I think in a weird way, like speedrunning kind of counters our comment today because there are so
Little
many
bit.
people who speedrun good, bad, and indifferent games.
Every single obscure game, Pepsi Man. I seen this Pepsi Man one. Like I
Mm-hmm.
watched it. I even watched the Pepsi Man.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and that definitely helps it. I mean, there's so many different segments in the gaming community that help keep it relevant, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I think that maybe like preservationists, speedrunners, and everything are going to try and keep everything relevant,
Mm-hmm.
somehow, some way. As far as though, like taking the game and remaking it or remastering it, though, that's a little different than
Mm-hmm.
how long it's going to stay around as a speedrun.
Yeah.
Yes, Pepsi Man speedmans are great.
Yeah. And I guess that does raise. I think this is another point that always comes when we talk about remakes and remasters: is do they invalidate the original game? And I think there's both pros and cons of this. Like if we're talking about like the Shadow Man example, that or Age of Empires 2, that their remasters legitimately invalidate the original purchase. Like there's no reason for you to go out and hunt down the original N64 or Dreamcast version of
Yeah.
Shadow Man. I still have somewhere around I think my original discs for Age of Empires 2. There's
Wow.
no need for me to ever install that. I know I have Age of Empires 3 somewhere here. And I think I saw my Civilization 3 tin, the collector's edition tin, somewhere here. It could be in that closet behind me. Maybe
You
I'll have
gotta,
to dig it out.
yeah, you gotta dig them out. You gotta put them out there.
Yeah. So in that case, that is a really good example. But when we talk about games of Gear, that sounds familiar, but I
Heavy
don't
gear,
think I've
yeah.
played it.
Heavy
The
gear, heavy
train.
gear.
Oh, we got a Pepsi hater in the chat. Uh oh. But when we talk about when a game is remade, like with the Final Fantasy VII, Tomb Raider, and so on, those like when people seem like they're trying to completely break, like we said earlier with the Tomb Raider one, that it kind of felt like they felt either like embarrassed or they wanted to kind of, I guess, like make amends of the original game. I think if that isn't looked as fairly.
No, no, that's kind of bad. It's like it's when you're actually like it. You can go about it as okay, we are re-envisioning. This is a new revision, a
Mhm.
reboot, a new idea. But like going back to the previous one, which is beloved, right? It was a
Mhm.
beloved reboot, one of my favorite reboots. You know what I mean? Like that one or remaster, whatever. One of it, like it was one of the best ones.
Mhm.
And then to go back and say it's bad and we want to gut everything, that's very strange and not doesn't seem like a good marketing technique.
Yeah, and again, it's something that we talk about when it comes to marketing. Who are you trying to appeal when it comes to the reboot? Because if you're trying to appeal to, and I'm the Dr. Brown outlier here, that who are you trying to appeal to with a reboot? Because if you're just gutting the entire game, then
Exactly.
you're not appealing to the original fans. But then if
Yeah,
you
you're
don't appeal to them, then you're kind of
who's
operating in the ether of who's going to play this new one. You
who's
know,
gonna play a gutted Tomb Raider experience that the most fans don't like? Like all the fans aren't gonna like it, and it doesn't isn't true in form in any way. Probably is what it sounds
yeah.
like. I don't know. That's a far.
And before I forget for the fifth time in my head, a good example of when a remaster comes into play is for games that are hard to find these days.
Yes.
And a
Yes.
big one that was just announced is the Tactics Ogre
Yeah,
remaster that's coming
I
to the
saw you posting
PC.
that. I already put it. I'm ready to get it. I'm excited for that one. And you played it
Tactics,
on the PSP too, also.
yeah, one of
Nice.
my
Favorite
favorites.
favorite one here. Awesome one.
And yeah, like games like that, like when we see developers remaster a game to put onto a more popular platform, or one like Josh said earlier, like bring it to the PC where it basically becomes immortal at that
Mortal on the
point.
PC. Yeah. Hmm.
That is really good. We need, if I'm using my psychic powers for good here, we need to get the entire Valkyria Chronicles series on the PC. We have 1 and we have 4. We
Yeah.
need 2 and
Yeah.
3.
Definitely. Good
Actually,
games.
just bring the whole PSP catalog to the PC and
That would be
Nintendo.
amazing.
Let me use all my powers for good here.
I mean, Sony's already doing it. I just saw Spider-Man, I think, announced on the Epic Game Store. So
Hmm.
they're bringing them to the PC one by one. God of War's on there, the remake, the few others. So yeah, they're definitely doing it. So
Hmm.
get all those PSPs on there. I mean, the market's huge. I don't see why not. Why they shouldn't do
Yeah.
it.
And to Miranai's comment, that actually goes with the Silent Hill. That's actually something that people talk about, the
Silent Hill.
Silent Hill remake or
Yeah,
remaster when they got rid of the fog
yeah.
and caused an entire uprising of the Silent Hill community.
Mm.
I think I remember Ignition, but I do not play racing games, so I know that I did not do that. Has a live service game ever been remastered? We could count stuff like, well,
Final Fantasy
actually,
14
yeah, or that I think was a remake. Like
remake.
we
Yeah,
could
remake.
certainly count. Like Payday 2 is an example. Like, they just celebrated a 9-year anniversary. I cannot believe it's been 9 years of Payday 2 at this point.
That's wild.
I
That
know.
is it's still going and it's active and wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wowzers. Remake F-Zero GX. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I want to remake Sheep Raider. So I'm gonna try and get the license. If anybody has it that's listening, pass it on to me.
Yes, they do. To Mr. Game and Chat and to
Yeah.
Mirai's comment, I'm probably one of the few people who did play Advent Rising. I played it all the way through to the end. And I still remember that franchise. Or, I'm sorry, it was supposed to be the start of a franchise that never got off the ground. And we're getting a new Alan Wake
It
as
never
well.
got off the ground. It's called Advent Rising, Josh.
Yeah. But again, like, how far do you take things when you remake and remaster them is, of course, the big question. Because do you feel like if do you feel like it should be a case where a remaster should try and make amends of the original, either fix pain points,
Mhm.
or do we just make it just here's the game, now you can play it on your PS5 or on your Steam Deck? Because
No
again,
way.
yeah,
Yeah, if you're doing the remaster, you need to get those pain points out. There's no
hmm
reason to do it. I mean, unless you have a ramen budget funding, and for
hmm
some reason you can only say, okay, we can just port it. This is just so you guys can play it again. This is all we could do. I'm sorry, we only had $20, one assistant. Okay, maybe, but if you're doing it, I think you should remove the pain points and try and make some amends for it. Right, just
yeah.
some changes to it. Um, I think that's what you got to do, Josh.
Yeah, and I would also argue, like, we're talking about, like, especially early first person shooters where there is no
Oh yeah,
mouse look.
yeah,
Mouse look needs to be in the remaster. Like,
yeah.
and this again goes back to what we said earlier about what is a tenet of a retro game and what is just a technical limitation. And
Exactly.
I think that goes with Malwini's comment. So some games have a shelf life. Yeah, and again, like as we talk about when it comes to modern retro games, that you can't just make Super Mario Brothers 2 today. You can't just make again, even the original Resident Evil. I would well maybe Resident Evil like again like if you can upgrade and add new stuff to it. But just stopping at the original is not going to make a new market for you. Yeah. Yeah, when they added new books and they to the Warcraft remaster. Gameplay changes, and yeah, sequels are even another wrinkle we could discuss. But I guess here's that big challenge when we talk about things from a franchise point of view. Can a franchise stay current or stay relevant? This has been like one of the biggest challenges of AAA games. We have to have 15, well, we're up to 15, 16 different Final Fantasies. We have to have more and more Uncharted games. I'm sure Naughty Dog is probably working on either an Uncharted 4 or a Last of Us 3 as we speak at some point.
Yeah.
And it's a tough point about how these franchises stay relevant. Mario is probably one of the quintessential good examples. The Mario games have evolved dramatically.
Perfect every time. I mean, even Sunshine didn't stumble that much. I mean, like every time they pretty much hit it.
It's the same thing I say with From Software games.
Yeah.
A bad From Software game is still at least like an 8 or 9 out of 10 for that year.
Right, definitely. Like I'd never seen them got bad, review lower than an 8. Right, it's always still mentioned. Like what DS2 is despised, and it was still like among the conversation for best game of the year. So
yeah, I think I said I hated that game, but I still put like top 8 or top 9 of the year from when it came out.
Right, exactly. I put I despised it. I had like 3. I didn't despise it, but I got like a 300 hours just of PvP alone on it. So.
Yet Minecraft will probably never die as well.
Yeah, Minecraft will never die either. Like some of those games, I feel like they're gonna turn into. I mean, like how we have games now, like checkers and chess and things like that. Like eventually, I think those games will go into the ethos of like ethos. Is that the right word? Like they're just gonna be there forever. It's a Minecraft or it's a checkers. Like I kind of feel like there's gonna be some games that get there. And Minecraft, just because of its remake, Samurai Pizza Cats, I'll work on it. But I feel like Minecraft is one of those games just because it's oriented toward a younger audience. It's Lego boxy, and so it's just one of those games that I feel could be like that. And I felt a lot more games are going to be like that too. And like when you were mentioning, okay, well, how long can you go with this game? Like I think like maybe a game like Call of Duty should just go full live service. Like why are we making another Call of Duty? Just add maps to it. You want to add another campaign, add a DLC campaign to it. You need to update the engine. You can patch the engine into an update. Like I don't see a reason to keep doing that for certain franchises, right? Like even like a fighting game like Tekken. Why does there have to be a Tekken 8? Instead, take Tekken 7, update it or whatever. You know what I mean? How far can you go?
Yeah. So and again, like the fighting genre is very interesting in that respect because there are a lot of fighting games that again have a very entrenched fan base, and any changes to it, it's going to be met with an open revolt. And again, like Street Fighter would probably be an example of like they've been trying to change the formula over the last few years. I know what we up to. Street Fighter 6, I think, is the one that was just announced. And it looks like they're trying to make things different. Again, it's always that push and pull when it comes to franchises. That if you just make the same game 8 times, people are going to get tired of it. But if you change it too much, then people get pissed off and say, you ruined my game, how dare you. They're doing player playing eternal aiming with... Oh man, I cannot go back to arrow keys. I'm a WASD for life at this point.
WASD for life, man. Since I touched the keyboards, WASD.
Yeah.
Candy Crush is timeless, says Mr.
Probably Farmville will keep going until the sun dies. And like, here's a good example, I think, of like this kind of challenge of franchising and again, modern retro. If you remember, I love King's Bounty. It is one of my favorite games. King's Bounty: The Legends was like 2005, 2006. They did King's Bounty 3, 2. Again, there's like 8 different expansions for the original King's Bounty, so it's hard to tell like where they throw with the numbers. King's Bounty 2, and we played that on stream. And I did not like it. We played for about just under, I think, an hour, maybe 2 hours, somewhere around there. And it felt like the magic was lost. Like, this is not the game that when I think of King's Bounty, I don't think of King's Bounty 2. And then when we look at a game like Songs of Conquest, this was another one we played, I think it was this year or late last year. This is a game that's built off of the Heroes of Might and Magic formula. And it feels like a more up-to-date version of that. Like, it feels like a continuation. And I think that, again, goes back to what we talk about when we look at modern retro and franchise, that we want to see a continuation. We don't want to see, 1996 game. We want to see, well, let's say this franchise kept going. Let's say it kept evolving and becoming bigger. What could somebody do as the next step?
Exactly. Well said, Josh.
I like independent. I think that is an interesting point. That it becomes a brand, but it opens up new possibilities. Like, again, like as we talked about, games that become the first become like their own institutions. Super Mario 64, Darkest Dungeon, FTL, and so on. That they really do, they stand the test of time simply by being the most successful and the biggest example. But again, then that becomes a challenge of how do you go more than that?
Right.
And we've seen developers sadly struggle. What was it? Darkest Dungeon 2 is kind of in this very strange ether that I'm not hearing as much praise and, shouts of joy about.
Is it out? Is it out or
early access on Epic right now?
Okay, I might check it out.
What was the other one? Dungeon. Into the Breach.
Into the Breach.
It is a very interesting game, but it is hard to sit down and want to play that game. Like I said this. Like, I respect Into the Breach. It's just a little too much. Like, as a game that I want to sit down and play.
I respect the programming out of that game. That's wild. But yeah, I mean, that game just makes me feel very unintelligent. So
you can say the same about any Zachtronics title as well.
Just like I thought I was a game computer engineer. What the?
Mm-hmm. And then you play a Zachtronics game, and all your knowledge is gone.
Gone.
Yep, and it's always that challenge. I mean, we talk about going back to Resident Evil. I mean, Resident Evil had a huge downward spiral in the mid-2000s into the early 2010s.
Could not believe it for the fall from grace.
Everyone remembers Resident Evil 6 and how much they loved the horror of Resident Evil 6 in that one. When Chris is clotheslining zombies and neck snapping them. That was terrifying. Yeah. And sometimes we need that reboot. Sometimes a franchise just gets to that point. And I guess here's the question for you and for the chat. Resident Evil 7 was considered pretty much a soft reboot of the entire franchise. And they tried to retcon the franchise back with 8. I was not a fan of that. Like, I like the fact that with Resident Evil 7, it felt like we were resetting the table in a matter of speaking.
Yeah.
Did you like how they were trying to bring, 7 or bring 8 and like that kind of trilogy back into the original Resident Evils?
No. I mean, 7 was really amazing, and I just thought we were going to be heading that way, like for the rest of them. So no, I didn't like that at all. I didn't like that retcon one bit, Josh.
Yeah, and it is like very tough again when you have franchises so, ingrained like that. Because I'm sure there's a lot of people who didn't like 7 by the fact that it's a first person. And I mean, how many of us heard comments from people saying, oh, they're just ripping off Outlast? Or, Resident Evil 7 is just going to be, Five Nights at Freddy's clone. Stuff like that. Yeah. And it's like, let's see, remake Crash. Oh, Crash Bash. I still need to play Crash 4. Maybe if they ever bring it over to Games Pass.
I just actually played a level or two this morning with the wife. She was playing it. She liked it.
Nice. And we did, speaking about, due design to expire, if you remember, during, I think it was last festival, I played that indie game that's, basically an indie take off Crash Bandicoot. And it works. It works as a spiritual successor, but it was rough to play. Like it was not. Again, it goes back to that point that if I didn't play Crash Bandicoot, there would be no reason for me to play this game.
Yeah, definitely. Like anybody, if you put someone in front of Crash Bandicoot, they're like, "Why am I running straight and then now backwards?" And it's like they wouldn't understand it one bit. And then you'd be like, "Well, due to the limitations of the PlayStation 1, they had to design it this way to make it 3D. So they're keeping it true to form in this Crash game." And so, yeah, unless you played it, no reason at all. Hollow Knight and Silk Song.
Yep, and it's that difficulty of how do you keep these games and these designs relevant. Very recent, we played 2 Point Campus on stream. This was this past week, and I was like, yeah, it's like Theme Hospital, but that's about it. Like, I just felt like I played for like it was like an hour or so on stream. I was like, okay, I kind of got my fill. Like it doesn't really move that needle forward. And I think that's always that difficulty. Like when we see developers be inspired by another game, is that yes, aiming for that first one is great, but where else are you going to go with it?
Right, and like art, take essences or things or mechanics or stuff like that and put your own spin on it and change it up, right? If there's a mechanic you like from a certain game, you're like, man, I like that. Well, how can you change that and reskin it, retool it, and adapt it to your game, right? Just a little bit different.
They are remaking Five Nights at Freddy's. Damn.
Wow.
I did not know about that. Let's see.
Wow.
Five Nights at Freddy's Plus.
Steam page is up already.
An official Vanverse made reimagining of a modern horror classic. That is a sentence right there. Officially fan-made reimagining of a modern horror. Whew.
Wow, it's gonna be like an Unreal Engine, and what does it look like? I gotta see this.
Ooh, it's revamped, pre-rendered 2D visuals. They remastered the 2D visuals.
Oh, wow! And yeah, the doors and iframes and Souls-like is a really good thing, Pony. Agree.
Mm-hmm. Oh my! Wait, the game designed to be a replacement, but it will accompany it as a new spin. Wait. New spin on a beloved classic set in an alternate universe. This marketing page is like hurting me a little bit. Like it's starting to give me a stress damage. Oh, I remember Dune 2000, Malwinius. Was that the Westwood one? Or there could have been another Dune before that. Well, they did. Didn't they already remade Super Metroid 2? Or just Metroid. I'm sorry, it wasn't a Super back then. I'm sure that's something on Nintendo's plate to do a remake of Super Metroid at some point.
Yes, definitely.
Oh man, wow! Now we're already. I guess as a quick time check, we are just about an hour in. That actually takes me to a question: how soon should a game be remade or remastered? Ooh. Because again, like with The Last of Us, it's only like 4 or 5 years old. Demon's Souls was what, like 10 years when it got its remake.
Yeah.
Or its remaster. And
like Demon's Souls, yeah, definitely. That was a while, but Last of Us, I feel like it's already been remade 3 times? Or
yeah, there was the original PS3. I know there's a version of it on PS4.
Yeah.
And now there's a version of it on PS5.
PS5, yeah. And I think there's like 2 versions on the PS4. I'm not sure. Chat might have to. But definitely a little too soon on The Last of Us.
Yeah, and it also, the Joe beat me to the comment. Yeah. That just feels like you're just trying to, beat a dead horse. That you're just trying to keep getting it. And that's one of the issues I have with a lot of Nintendo stuff. That they keep remastering like the original Marios for each new platform. Like, yes, I've bought Super Mario Brothers on the NES, the SNES. I think I have it on the GameCube.
Yeah.
There's, you can buy on the Wii and the Wii U, and it's on the Switch. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
and the Super Mario remasters on the DS as well, or and
the
the Game
DS.
Boy Advance.
Yep, I
So
got
you
them
can
all.
just play the same game 10 different times on 10 different platforms. Wait, it's not so much that I don't like CCGs, it's that I don't have the money to play so many of them. Remake Magic the Gathering. I think you just gave a Wizards of the Coast designer a heart attack with that
Yeah,
sentence.
man.
For Smash Brothers 64 remake, well, they technically. Oh no, I'm thinking. Wait, Super Smash Brothers. Wait, that's like 3 games there. Free to start.
Yeah, free to start.
But I do need to try one of the Magic the Gathering, so for the next book. Yeah. And again, like some people will argue that they are adding in new accessibility features, which is nice, but it's still something that, okay, that's great, but how does that give us more of the original game? Well, yeah,
Yeah,
get good. I mean,
yeah.
if you're
No,
good at CCG, you only need to spend 1 cent. It's like I can play all the mobile games without spending any money. Just
nothing
get
at all.
good
I'd
at
end up.
gotchas.
He's gonna get real. Josh, you gotta write a book how to get good at gotchas.
There we go. And you can justify again remasters if we're going like for, I would say, I think 10 years. I think that's a
10 years is
good
good.
time. Like we're going from, I would say, 2 platform generations.
Yeah.
I think that's fine. But if you're going to a game that already had a remaster and then another remaster and now it's on its third one, yeah, that doesn't really work.
Or the
And,
only other reason, just get it to the PC. Get everything to the PC so that way it can become immortal.
yeah. God of War's on the PC now. I want
Yes.
God of War Bloodborne combination. Go.
Whoa.
And we are seeing again, like, another big aspect of these games is that as the franchises grow, they definitely become altered or affected by the other games around. As we saw with games adopting loot boxes or being downgraded. I know a lot of people didn't like, what was it, the third or fourth Thief game? The one that had the number in the title. They felt it was a severe drop in quality.
Yeah.
And that's another really important point there. Again, it's about the price. The Bolsky's comment that why should I spend $70 on a game that's been out for 5, 10, 20 years, even if you are remastering it?
Yeah. Yeah. There's no reason. Like you've already recouped all your money like a long time ago, right? And if you're even if you're you're remastering or wherever you're doing the porting it's like you don't just tack that charge on, right? It's just it should be less. The game is worth less. It's an older game, not just because it's like, hey, first time on PC, $150. No, it should be $40, something reasonable because it's been out so long, right?
Remake humanity. Well, what about that game? Everything. Remake everything. Everything. Yeah, and I think Pony's question or Pony's comment also goes with the Resident Evil 4 one. Like, you can't really remaster, corniness in some of these games. Like, the original Resident Evil 4 had so many classic lines. Your hand comes off and all that. Like, if you try to do the same thing with a remaster or with a remake, it just feels like you're trying to mine the well that was already like dried up at that point.
Yeah, just milking the nostalgia as much as you can.
Yeah. And again, I think that's why Resident Evil 2 Remake worked so well. Was that they just yes, the basic bones of the story are the same, but everything else is completely rebuilt. Like it doesn't feel like it was designed for nostalgia's sake. It felt like it was designed to make a new take on that game.
Exactly.
Where Resident Evil 3 felt like they took away more things. And it felt like it was just being... And I said this when I was doing a review of the Resident Evil games. I said that with Resident Evil 3, I don't want Resident Evil 2.3. Or Resident Evil 4, I don't want Resident Evil 2.4. And that, again, is that issue when it comes to remakes and remasters, is that if you're just copying what you've already done, it's not really it just feels like a cash grab.
Yeah, just a crash grab, exactly. PS3 is a remake of DS1. Yeah, yeah, I could agree with that. DS3 is definitely its own little beast there, for sure.
Yep, and to Melwini's comment that you do it too soon, people expect that, hey, if you went from, here with the original to here with the first remaster, well then, if you remaster another game, we want you to go up to here. And in a
Hmm.
lot of cases, it's just not possible. Outside of just, at that point, you're just remaking the game. You have to build a brand new game. I know
Yes,
they've been struggling. The System Shock remake has been in like internal development for like the
20
last decade.
years. Yeah, for forever. This poor.
Yeah. I do, and I will say this as again for people who've watched, I'm huge on game preservation. That my argument, or what I say, is that whenever you remake a game, the original one should still be available. Like it should be available, warts and all. Or if you remaster that original one, you should have those two versions available. One for a preservation standpoint, and two because again, we're talking about remakes. It's oftentimes a completely different game.
Exactly. Exactly. I agree with that 100%. You can't like overwrite the original, right? If
Yeah.
it in any way, like it's there, warts and all, you should be able to see it, see how it was. Preservation 100%. MDK remake too. Wow.
Oh, I would love that. I know there's a
Wow.
remaster of MDK. Let's see. Yeah, the
Wow.
MDK2 has a remaster, but yeah, they never really brought it back, I think. Oh, yeah, I remember that one. Oh, what was that one? Oh, I can't remember. There was this game from Interplay or Die Trying. ODK, was that it? Where you're like falling down, you're like a bomb on your arm and that kind of thing. And if El Gordo was watching, we need a remaster of Heart of Darkness, and I agree with him on that one. What's the name of that game? Again, this one is when you have like you've played like over like 10,000 games at
This
this
game.
point. It all just blurs together.
I'm just trying to think of interplay games.
Yeah. I wonder if I look it up really fast. Yeah, Heart of Darkness. Let's see. It may show up on their list. And we need a new Clay Fighter as well.
New Clay Fighter.
Let's
Earthworm Jim.
see.
Someone already mentioned that.
Space Ironheart. Lost Vikings. Run Like Hell. No, that wasn't the one I was thinking of.
Siberia.
Oh, yeah. They made a third one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think my friend is the one who has that. Where he did the Kickstarter. And they did what was it, Longest Journey? That got one as well.
Yeah.
And again, it's always hard when you're kind of trying to go forward in terms of again, like what do we keep from past games? Because I think for my final point that mechanics do I think have a shelf life that we're
Yeah.
just talking about just like the basic elements that there is a limit on how much you can get out of just a basic 2D platformer or a basic first person shooter. And again, it's why we saw with a lot of boomer shooters. Oh, I want to remake a block. But it's why for a lot of the boomer shooters have kind of quieted down because a lot of people have gotten tired of, yeah, it's just another reskin of Doom or Quake. That the ones that do well, like Dusk, Ultra Kill, there's a few other ones I'm forgetting, they legitimately do something different. That going back to what I said earlier, it's not about hitting the goal of these old games or these old designs, but then saying, well, what if people kept making these games? How could we have improved on that?
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, man. Like again, for sure, like you said earlier, Josh, the mechanics for sure, right? That ages, right? And those are always updated. We always change them. We're always seeing how we can improve mechanics. So if a mechanic is outdated, doesn't work, for sure, update that to new current standards. Stuff like camera angles and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
right? How you had camera controls, you can't have old stiff camera controls because maybe they had a different controller, didn't even have analog sticks. Analog sticks and of course system UI, things like that, accessibility, all those things should definitely be. If we were still making it, it would have those things in it, right? So
Mm-hmm. Yep. And again, it's why you can't just stop at some of these older mechanics. And again, like future talking right now, it's going to be crazy what's going to happen in 20 years. And people talk about, again, those old retro games like Elden Ring, that
yeah.
old man's game. Who the hell keeps playing Elden Ring now?
Those servers are still going to be popping.
Mm-hmm. But I think that is my final point. So, do you have any topics or any things you want to discuss?
Oh man, that basically, I think we basically covered it pretty well there. I think we're good.
Releases.
Is there any comments here?
I mean, at least for Steam, we know Steam will never die, I think. Or,
Yeah,
Steam will die when the world, I think, goes with it.
for sure, definitely. And I think even like if people are, there's going to be some massive Steam preservation. If for some reason Steam cannot financially support that, I'm sure there's going to be some kind of way for everybody to have sole ownership of their games. And Steam's going to be here till we all die. So
Mhm.
anyway,
And I do want to see, like, again, like more classic games at least being brought up to quote unquote modern standards. That we can
definitely.
at least play them. So, like, No One Lives Forever, the vast majority of PC games that were released before, like some 3D cards and stuff like that. Those
Yeah.
boomer soul games. There you go.
Yeah. Remake Samurai Pig.
Do it.
Yeah.
You can do that in like a week, right? You can.
For sure. Definitely, Josh.
Is there a remaster button on
Yes.
Unreal?
Unreal Engine 5 has a remaster button now, so
You
yeah,
hit it
just
3 times, you get 3 remasters.
remasters for yeah, and I can get it for like PlayStation 2, I mean 2, PlayStation 4, 5.
Hmm.
Oh,
And again, the new crate will be demaking, as we saw the
right.
Bloodborne demake.
The demaking. Didn't we was that last week or the week before demaking? We went over some demakes.
Oh no. Or the potential, which would be. And I mean, we saw with the Oddworld remakes
Oddworld,
as
yeah.
well.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. But I do
Saw
wish that we saw like more. Again, like when you're remaking, you can't just upgrade graphics at that point. Like again, like
yeah.
as we said, the difference between a remake and a remaster.
Yeah.
And don't introduce new bugs in the remake or remaster. There's another pro tip for you.
Yes, please don't. Please don't. more more Joshes. Remake Game Master, more Joshes.
There you go.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So, anytime you're remaking it, quality of life issues, pain points, look over those things. How can you modernize it? Again, if the game was like released today, but then, how would it be today? And so that's what you have to consider. What is the essence of the game and what were really like limitations or situations of oversight, right? So,
Hmm. Yeah. What was put in because of limitation, and what was put in as something required.
exactly, exactly. Trying to figure it out there, Josh. Trying to get it.
Hmm. All right. Well, I think that does it for me. Anything else?
No, I think that's it. I got to get on remaking Samurai Pig now. I got 3 check boxes to click,
Hmm.
and then I'll have that.
Make sure you do a demake as well.
We'll do a
Just
demake also.
yeah.
I'll click the demake checkbox.
Oh, and I forgot to mention someone I think could have been Malwinius or someone else was talking about the door animations in the Resident Evil games. If you really like those door animations, check out all the indie horror games because a lot of developers have copied that in some way,
Big on
shape, or
that.
form.
Big on that. They did.
Hmm.
It really immerses you.
All right, everyone. We are going to say goodnight here for this week's show. So, as always, thank you everybody for tuning in, whether you're watching this live or recorded. If you want to follow me, my links or my things are up there: Patreon, Discord, Twitter, as well as down below.
Same thing for me. Follow me on Twitch, Twitter, and Wishlist Samurai Pig. Buy Josh's book. Join Josh's Discord, and we will see you next time.
Yep, and thank you as well, Amanda. Yep, everyone be sure to pre-order and buy the book. We'll have to do something, I guess, special for next week's show, I guess, in
That's
honor of
right.
it.
That's right.
But everybody, come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where you are on science of games. Have a great rest of your weekend, and talk to you next time around 5 p.m. for the next show.